Alright everyone, after several weeks of lack of self-awareness, CNN has finally come around to the same conclusion that I came to the first time that there was a riot in Minneapolis over the death of George Floyd. You know, back in that very brief moment of time, and you'll remember because I made a video at the time. Very brief moment in time. It was primarily about George Floyd. Most people involved in protesting or rioting knew who he was. Now he's just been thrown into the mix with people like Trayvon Martin, who assaulted a man, by the way, Mike Brown, and other people as part of an omnibus of grievances against loosely the government, police in general, and so forth. The reason why there won't be police reform, and I said it to begin with, is because the public would immediately fixate on riots. Even though, let's say that you have 1,000 people protesting over here and 2 people throwing rocks over there. Who gets the attention? The rock throwers. The squeaky wheel gets the oil. People who loot and shoot and burn things make for good TV and really exciting live streams with a lot of super chats. People standing around or kneeling at a candlelight vigil, that's good for a little comfy story. Here's a 10-second clip of the 10,000 people gathered in Times Square to honor George Floyd's death and demand police reform. Now back to 23 hours of non-stop explosions and fire. There was never going to be meaningful police reform. Seems, well, oh, it's so sad. People are so racist. It's not about racism. What happens is this. Middle America, and a small town America, middle class America, average Ken and Karen, the boomer, the Gen Xer, a millennial like me at this point. You turn on the TV or live stream or whatever, and you're reading up in the news, talking about politics. Oh, a man was killed by police. Oh, that's very sad. What was my initial reaction when the story first broke about George Floyd? To say, as a libertarian, I am worried about police brutality. It is a threat in some metro areas, number one. Number two, I grieve for George Floyd's family because they had to see this fucking footage of this dude getting killed. And it doesn't matter if he was on fentanyl or whatever. Dude, this dude stopped breathing and the cop knelt on his neck for 3 more minutes. It was an egregious violation of power. It's good that he's gotten charged, and Keith Ellison, for the first time in his miserable career, did something good by bumping it from 3rd to 2nd in the charges. So, yeah, congratulations. But that was for the first few hours of this story. That wasn't even an entire fucking day. By the next day, my coverage was, well, you can forget about police reform because people have decided to burn Minneapolis to the ground. What happened? The NRA was crowing about this. Gun sales over the month skyrocketed. 2 million additional new gun owners. By the way, gun owners vote heavily Republican in every state except for my home state of Vermont. They did an analysis. In homes without guns, West Virginia is the only state that still would have gone Republican. And in homes with guns, Vermont was the only one that would still be Democratic. It's very interesting. The literal dipoles of U.S. politics. West Virginia, so massively red, and Vermont being Bernie Sanders. Funland with Ben and Jerry's. Still a lot of guns, however, as well. Not much meaningful gun control in Vermont. The little bit that now exists because of our cuck governor will probably get thrown out by the courts anyway. Police brutality reform is structurally impossible within the U.S., and I'll tell you why. What happens anytime there is an instance of brutality, and anytime where there are protests, by the way. It's not just for this. It's for any issue. This is why there's no progress in our society. People start protesting and the cops are distracted, and everyone that wants to go wild goes and loots and shoots and burns things. And form little autonomous communities where now I think 8 or 9 people have been shot in Chaz over the course of less than a month. There's definitely a gun violence epidemic. It happens to be in a 6 square block radius in downtown Seattle because of a bunch of communists. The other night there was a video where there was a car that got stopped at an intersection by rioters who were blocking the road, and some dude randomly whipped out a gun and aimed it at the car, and they opened fire. Bunch of fucking hooligans. Police reform and similar structural reform are impossible because of those things happening. Because the second that there's a rock thrown, the second the Wendy's goes up in smoke, polite middle-class Americans buy guns and an extra can of beans and prepare to bug out, number one, and they start leaning further and further left. When these people, why do you think the legacy media is so reluctant to show riot footage at this point on TV? You have to go to like live streams and stuff run by third parties to get your footage now. Why do you think that is? Why do you think that they largely cover up stories of violence at Chaz? Because they know that middle America will see that and freak out and vote for Trump, number one, and buy more guns, number two. That's why they freak out. It's not going to be any police reform. These cities that are impotently voting to defund their police forces in part, you know what's going to happen? You're going to get flight out of those cities. They used to have a term called white flight, coined after the race riots in Detroit, of course. Detroit started to collapse thereafter. It's not going to be white flight. You think anyone with expendable income, the ability to move, do you think they want to live in a community that already had a crime problem and now has 10% less police to defend them and their property? That has a dumb system of social workers, unarmed police showing up for any call that's not an active shooter situation? Do you think that citizens actually want that? Or do you think that this is a very tiny minority of people in the political elite who all have their own private security, number one, vouching for the 1% of the population that actually believes in this bullshit? The idea that this is police reform in any structural sense is completely warped anyway. And the reason why you're getting sold that pig in a poke is because real reform is impossible. You're never going to be able to get enough people on board for it. What you need for police reform is to get rid of the police unions. That's what you need. You need to have cops paid and more and trained better, but de-unionize them so they can actually get fired when they do something wrong. Half the time that there's a cop that does something illegal, murders someone in cold blood on the street, we find out that they've got a long rap sheet of complaints against them, and they didn't get fired because the union wouldn't let them. Oh, well, it's just one incidence of him clubbing a 10-year-old in the face with his nightstick on a drunken rampage. No, we're not going to let you fire him. We stand at the thin blue line. We stand behind our brother or our sister. It happens all the fucking time. That's the real problem. Unions! Why do you think the educational system in the U.S. has fallen like, 30 rankings over the last 30 years? Why? I wonder why. Could it be shitty teachers can't be fired? Could it be that unionization that the progressive era spawned is responsible for half our fucking problems as a country? That's how you reform the police. Yeah, pay them more. You shouldn't be defunding them. You should fund them more. But make it a meritocracy. Get rid of the ones that suck. Get rid of the sucky teachers, the sucky doctors, the sucky everyone. Get rid of every union. If you have a steel worker who doesn't know how to work steel, you fucking fire them. That's the problem. But you're never going to have that conversation. Instead, we're going to have social workers talking to people on the streets. A rioting, looting, thuggish horde will be tossing Molotov cocktails through business windows, and the cops won't even be allowed to respond. Look at Seattle. You have an armed insurrection in every legal sense going on actively in Seattle. The reluctance of the federal government to get involved because they don't want to look like they're trying to establish a dictatorship aside, Seattle should have wiped them off the face of the earth already. The police already should have arrested everyone involved here. They're destroying public property. They're committing acts of rape and sexual assault, multiple arsons, nighttime vandalism, on top of all the minor complaints, all the civil complaints like noise disturbances and criminal threats, terroristic threats. Some of these people are felons carrying assault rifles. Assault rifles, of course, we have to do in quotes. And nothing's being done. The Seattle police aren't even allowed to respond. Their idiot mayor won't let them. Now, instead, the city literally guarded these people by putting up vehicle barriers to keep them from getting rammed into. Probably to keep traffic flowing around the blighted zone of commies. Yeah, there's not going to be any police reform, but I told you that on day one. CNN did 2 weeks later, says, oh, there's not going to be meaningful police reform. Well, no fucking shit, we all told you so. How are you going to reform the police if you're not even willing to have a reasonable conversation about how to do it? Your idea boils down to either getting rid of the cops, if you listen to the fringe cringe, or kind of get rid of the cops if you listen to the socialist sort of mainline. And if you listen to the liberals, it's all touchy-feely bullshit from Biden. Oh, we need to have a conversation as a nation. You're never going to have the conversation. By the way, you can elect supermajority Democrats, House, Senate, elect Biden. They're not going to change anything. These tough-on-crimers, most of them are Democrats. Ken and Karen apparently were Democrats too, defending their front lawn against people who were trespassing at the time, but supposedly they're not allowed to defend their property anymore. No, Americans are going to buy more guns. I bet for June they were record totals too, and I bet for July there will be as well. We're entering July, yet a new month, and there are still some riots going on. They're not as prevalent as before, but there's still sporadic looting. These people are still marching around throwing rocks and insults. Yeah, damn right there are going to be more gun sales, and people are going to tilt dizzily far right. I think that I worry about that more. I worry about an uprising far right becoming like the left is now and becoming censorious and insane. Because, they're more well organized. They're more likely to actually spawn genocide and things of that nature. Leftists, yeah, usually under communist regimes, they only slaughter their own people, and they just crack them apart into various minorities and then let them starve. Like, you know, the Holodomor. 30, yeah, there's something, 20, 30 million people killed in that, and you never learned about it in school, by the way. And also people who deny that it exists, they magically don't get deplatformed off the internet. It's interesting how that happens. That's about all. Peace out.